as I had feared, the computer died. So I ran into school and got the cable, and now I'm continuing. The computer died right in the middle of this sentence, so I'll back up a bit. The king's home had been a true megaron, one room with a throne and a hearth. The prison had been the agora, where citizens met and merchants hawked their jumble. The individual cells had been stalls of, no, not horses, different kinds of stalls. Stalls of clothes or wines or candles or jewelry. So no animals weren't in here. Sort of like little sections of stores, booths, like you see if you go to a craft show. Jewelry imported from the islands. Prominent citizens used to stand on the stone blocks in the courtyard to make speeches. So Jen has been describing what his prison used to be. We are also getting a little bit of history of this place where he is 2,500 or so years ago. Then the invaders had come with their long boats and their own ideas of commerce. They did their trading in open markets next to their ships. So commerce is the idea of trade. They had taken over the king's megaron for their governor and used the solid stone building of the agora as a prison. So now we know how a shopping mall basically got into a prison. Prominent citizens who used to stand on stone blocks ended up chained to the blocks instead of standing on them. The old invaders were pushed out by new invaders, and in time, Sunis revolted. Here we have the name of this country, this nation. This is absolutely fantasy. So the author has made up a nation, and she ends up writing about 5 books based on this made up nation. In time, Sunis revolted and had her own king again. So it revolted against the invaders so that they could have their own king again. Still, people did their trading down by the waterfront. It had become a habit, and the new king continued to use the agora as a prison. It was useful to him as he was no relation to any of the families that had ruled the city in the past. By the time I ended up there, most people in the city had forgotten the prison was ever anything but a holding pen for those who failed to pay their taxes and other criminals. So now we're done with the history. Now we get back into a bit of the action that's going to happen to our main character, Jen. I was lying on my back in my cell with my feet in the air, wrapped in the chain that led from my waist to a ring high in the wall. So his waist is chained to the wall. It was late at night. The sun had been gone hours and the prison was lit by burning lamps. I was weighing the merits. I was trying to decide which would be better. I was weighing the merits of clean clothes versus better food. So, if I had to pick, would I get clean clothes or would I choose to have better food? He was not paying attention to the tramp of feet outside my cell. There was an iron door that led from the prison into a guard room at the narrow end of the building. The guards passed through it many times a day. If I heard the door banging, I no longer took any notice of it, so I was unprepared, not prepared, when lamplight, concentrated by a lens, flared into my cell. I wanted to look lithe and graceful and perhaps feral as I unwrapped my feet and sat up. Caught by surprise and nearly blind, I was clumsy and would have fallen off the stone bunk if the chain had not still been wrapped around one foot. This is the right one? No wonder the voice sounded surprised. I levered myself upright and blinked into the lamplight, unable to see much. The guard reassured someone that this indeed was the prisoner he wanted. "All right, take him out," the guard said. "Yes, Magus." Remember, the Magus is the scholar who gives advice to the king of the country of Sunis. "Yes, Magus," the guard said as he unlocked the barred gate. So I knew who it was at my door late at night. one of the king's most powerful advisors. In the days before the invaders came, the king's magus was supposed to have been a sorcerer. But not even the most superstitious believed that anymore. A magus was a scholar. He read scrolls and books in every language and studied everything that had ever been written and things that had never been written as well. If the king needed to know how many shafts of grain grew on a particular acre of land, the magus could tell him. If the king wanted to know how many farmers would starve if he burned that acre of grain, the magus knew that too. His knowledge, matched by his skills of persuasion, gave him the power to influence the king. If you influence someone, you give them information to help them make the decisions that you want them to make. So the magus, because he has such knowledge and is so persuasive, the king of Sunis makes the decisions usually that the magus wants him to make. And that made him, the magus, a powerful figure at the court. He had been at my trial. I had seen him sitting in a gallery behind the judges with one long leg crossed over the other and his hands folded over his chest. That's where we're going to end the reading for today. I do want you to get some vocabulary down. You may need to pause the video. You'll need 3 note cards on this page, and I want it to go in your reading folder across from the page where we put the fantasy genre notes. So the first vocabulary is narrator, the second is point of view, and the third word you'll work on is idiom. Not idiot, although the only difference is the M at the end, but idiom. If you don't understand idioms, you can seem like an idiot. We'll start with narrator though. I'll zoom out a little bit here. So the definition of the narrator, this goes on the note card, not the paper. On the note card, the narrator is who is telling the story. If you have a play, very often the narrator speaks to the audience. It's a little harder to figure out the narrator in a book. The narrator of a book could be a character that is in the story. It could be someone outside the story. So Anne of Green Gables had a narrator outside the story. We never really learned about the narrator. But in 1Thief, the narrator is the main character. Jen is telling the story. There are 3 types of narrators. A first-person narrator is the character in the story telling it and saying I. So the narrator is telling the story, but not speaking directly to the audience. Just saying, I did this, I did that, and then speaking about other characters by name. In second-person narration, the character is also in the story, but this character talks to the readers and tells the readers, you should understand this. You need to know this information. So that's second person. That is, as far as the reading that I have done, especially children's books, that is the least common type of narrator. You also have third person narrators. That narrator is outside of the story. They're an observer telling the story. And this is like Anne of Green Gables was. If you need to pause to get this information, pause and get it copied down. Point of view, the definition of point of view, it's how one character or the author thinks about what is going on. Here I have an example. From Poppy, remember, it would switch sometimes and tell us what the owl thought, and then it would tell us what the mouse thought. That is an example of changing the point of view. Sometimes the author will change the point of view without making it clear. That is not the case in 1Thief. In 1Thief, it is always a first-person point of view. It is always Jen telling the story. So that's kind of nice. given the fact that Jen is the one telling the story, we very much hear the story from Jen, who is a thief. We learn what he thinks of the other characters. And we always have to remember that he is a thief who started the story in prison. So his point of view, I told you, he never lies to us as he's telling the story, but what he thinks of the other characters and what he says to the other characters is very much based on who he is and what he thinks about what's going on, his point of view. Idioms. An idiom is figurative language. It's a common saying that does not literally mean what the words say. The example so far that we have from the thief is that Jen spat insults. That's the idiom. It just means that he said the insults rudely. So when you recognize an idiom, you need to recognize, oh, hey, wait, this isn't exactly what it means. There's a different meaning that is more common that I should understand. Be sure that you have these notes, these note cards filled out in your reading folder. And that is the end of today. I do apologize for the multiple videos that you had to watch to get through this chapter so far. We will finish the chapter in another video.